Beijing Olympics. As the controversial games reach their conclusion, we have a report from China. Continuing crisis. Tensions rise between Ukraine and Russia. How the White House is responding. Protecting the unborn. Florida joins the states which are advancing pro-life protections. And food for thought. An effort to feed the homeless in Italy has reached the Vatican. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, February 18th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. The 2022 Winter Olympics are coming to a close in Beijing this weekend. The Games presented several challenges, including how to deal with COVID-19 and other safety concerns, as well as diplomatic boycotts. And joining me now is Rishabh Jain, reporter for the Associated Press. Rishabh, welcome. Great to see you. You're currently in Beijing right now. Tell us what it's like as the Games are coming to a close.
As the Games are coming to a close, really, we're prepared for a massive closing ceremony. China is supposed to go all out with a grand celebration and huge fireworks. Obviously, doping has marred the Winter Games once again, and a lot of pressure was put on 15-year-old Kamila Valieva, the Russian figure skater, who was all set to win the gold but could not finished on the fourth spot. As the Games come to an end, we still have 2 days of exciting games, which will determine who finishes second and third, while it looks like Norway is definitely on top.
Rishabh, I want to go back to the Russian figure skater, the 15-year-old, as you mentioned before. I know her latest performance on the ice actually raised a lot of eyebrows, especially what happened afterwards. Talk to us about that.
Clearly, we could see everyone from the Russian figure skating team was very, very emotional. You could get a sense of the pressure that Valieva was under. She's only 15 years old, and we saw her fall twice. Despite her being the running contender for gold, everyone sort of came out crying from the Russian team at the end of that event. Turusova, who finished second, was extremely emotional, made some comments which have gone viral since. However, they were still able to snag the first and second positions, though the doping scandal is something that is not going to leave the Russian Olympic Committee anytime soon. And the onus now really is on the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, to decide what they do to deter athletes from doping at the pinnacle of sports.
Okay, let's move along then. On a more positive note, are there any other athletes whose performances were surprising to you?
Chinese figure skating pair Sui Weijing and Han Chan have broken the world record. They've set a record of 84.41 points in the pair figure skating contest, really driving home the advantage that China has had. China, in fact, has bettered their total of gold medals from 1 in Pyeongchang in 2018 to 8 already, with more games to come. So that is the highlight, really. The host country reigning in the home advantage.
And Rishabh, as we mentioned again, closing ceremonies are this weekend. Let's talk a little bit more about that and maybe what you are expecting to see.
Well, we're all expecting to see a very grand closing ceremony, much like everything else here at the 2022 Beijing Olympics. China is set to go all out with celebrations and fireworks, much like at the opening ceremony. And there's going to be a sense of relief in athletes and other participants who've been abiding by this strict bubble that was created to prevent any major outbreak of COVID-19. They're going to be relieved that they can now go back home and just be outside of the loop. And if the pandemic persists, really, China has shown the world how a major sporting event can be held during such dark times.
Okay, we have just a few minutes left. Wondering if you could just give us your final thoughts on this year's Winter Olympics.
The Winter Olympics have been marred with controversy. Really, the doping controversy took over the Olympics for a couple of weeks. We've seen a lot of inclusion as well. Black skier from USA winning the top spot, and her teammates stepping down so she can compete. It really has been an Olympics which has set the tone for more inclusion in winter sports, something that has been traditionally dominated by European countries.
Okay, we'll leave it right there. Thank you so much for your time today, Rishabh. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
While the White House and President Joe Biden continue to ramp up pressure on Russia not to invade Ukraine, but administration leaders all express alarm about a potentially dangerous escalation. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. Tonight, the White House says President Joe Biden spoke by phone today with transatlantic leaders on what it calls continued diplomatic and deterrence efforts. In eastern Ukraine, air raid sirens, a call to get out. Pro-Russian rebels evacuating civilians there and relocating them to Russia. And back at the White House, members of President Joe Biden's national security team give this assessment.
We believe that the Russian government is responsible for wide-scale cyber attacks on Ukrainian banks this week.
U.S. leaders have warned another invasion could come any day. Vice President Kamala Harris, attending the annual Munich Security Conference, spoke with the head of NATO.
We remain, of course, open to and desirous of diplomacy as it relates to the dialogue and the discussions we have had with Russia. But we are also committed, if Russia takes aggressive action, to ensuring there will be severe consequence.
And visiting Poland in a show of solidarity with a NATO ally, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said Russia could still attack at any time.
Although Russia has announced that it is moving its forces back to garrison, we have yet to see that. In fact, we see more forces moving into that region, that border region.
And while a colorful rainbow appeared over Kyiv, the darkness of a potential war is still lurking at the border.
I am deeply concerned about heightened tensions and increased speculation about a military conflict in Europe. I still think it will not happen, but if it did, it would be catastrophic.
Now, the Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technology also warned when it comes to malicious cyber attacks that, quote, Russia likes to move in the shadows. And also tonight, the U.S. has announced it's selling Poland 250 tanks for a price tag of $6 billion. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Florida's House of Representatives has approved a pro-life heartbeat bill to ban most abortions after 15 weeks. The bill now moves to the state's Senate. Lawmakers in Arizona and West Virginia have advanced similar legislation this week. The U.S. Senate avoids a government shutdown, passing a temporary funding bill, keeping it open until March 11th. Democrats are now looking to restart the child tax credit and earned income tax credit programs.
In my view, these are the most successful and most progressive social policies that have been passed by Congress in generations.
The programs expired in December when the Build Back Better Act was blocked in the Senate. Democrats say 30 million families no longer see up to $300 per child from the child tax credit deposited monthly into their bank accounts.
Food, childcare, diapers, healthcare, clothing, security. Because these are families who are middle-class families, low-income families. It's been a lifeline for them, and it's paycheck to paycheck.
Republicans, however, point to the costs.
The child tax credit is never discussed in terms of how much it costs, and all of us, want to give more help to families.
Democrats say the money helped millions of children escape poverty, but now they see those gains slipping.
We want, as a centerpiece of any package that we pass together, any reconciliation package, that the expanded child tax credit and the expanded earned income tax credit should be part of that, must be part of that.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops supports the effort, saying in part, the long-range future of this nation is intimately linked with the well-being of families, for the family is the most basic form of human community. To this end, we urge you to make the expanded child tax credit permanent. Talks continue over work requirements in a new version of the child tax credit. Congressman Jim Hagedorn has died after a 3-year battle with kidney cancer. Hagedorn was a Republican from southern Minnesota who followed in his father's footsteps into Congress. His wife announced the congressman's passing on social media. Jim Hagedorn was 59 years old. Coming up, the Holy Father prays for victims of a tragedy in Canada. Plus, Pope Francis is set to honor a religious order next Wednesday. We'll explain. An election for a new leader in Hong Kong has been postponed until May 8th due to a severe coronavirus outbreak. Chief Executive Carrie Lam says that she wants to avoid a lockdown.
So we will test everyone in Hong Kong. But mandatory testing and a complete city lockdown may not need to go hand in hand. It depends on the actual situation.
Hospitals in Hong Kong are at 90% capacity. The isolation units are now full. In Brazil, the death toll from a mudslide has risen to at least 120 people. A dramatic video captured the moment the wall of water struck. It shows the deluge plowing through Petropolis on Tuesday, sweeping away vehicles and homes. It was triggered by torrential rain estimated at more than 10 inches during the previous 3 hours, the heaviest measurable amount in 90 years. Pope Francis is offering heartfelt condolences for victims of a Spanish fishing boat that sank off the coast of Canada, leaving at least 10 people dead. Search and rescue efforts ended yesterday for 12 missing crew members. There were 3 rescued at sea after a severe ocean storm overwhelmed their trawler on Tuesday. The Holy Father conveyed his prayers to an archbishop in Spain. A second meeting between Pope Francis and the head of the Russian Orthodox Church may take place in June or July. Reports in Moscow say the exact date and location have not yet been finalized. The Holy Father met Patriarch Kirill in Cuba in 2016. It was the first ever meeting between a pope and the Patriarch of Moscow. Next week, during his weekly talk with pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father will recognize the Benedictine order. On Wednesday, the Holy Father will bless a torch with the order's Latin motto on it. The blessing kicks off the Benedictine March 2022, in which the flame will be taken throughout parts of Spain early next month. Joining us now from Rome is Father Mauritius Wilde, Procurator General of the Benedictine Confederation. Father Wilde, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Can you tell us about this torch initiative and the upcoming events in March?
Yes, certainly. Thank you for having me. This is a beautiful tradition that the torch of Saint Benedict is carried to all important places, Benedictine places in Italy, which is Nursia, the place where Saint Benedict is born, Subiaco, where he was in the cave, and finally to Monte Cassino, where he built his big monastery and finally died. So this is a relay of all those places, and it will start next week already, and it is called the Benedictine March.
And I understand back in 1964, Paul VI chose St. Benedict as the main patron saint of all of Europe. Can you tell us a little bit more about this and why?
Yes, absolutely. Pope Paul VI had a great love for St. Benedict. And that was the time right after the almost at the end of the Second Vatican Council. And there was felt the need to really focus on a patron who could unify and help unity and peace in Europe. So he was the first, St. Benedict was the first patron of Europe. Later on, John Paul II also named other saints, patron of Europe, Cyril and Method, St. Bridget, Catherine of Siena, and others. But the first one was Benedict.
And I also understand leadership and the role of St. Benedict is a joint educational project that will take place this summer. What's the purpose of this course? What can you tell us?
Yes, St. Benedict had a great impact in Europe and certainly beyond on education. He says that a monastery is a school for life. And so the Benedictines from the beginning were into education and formation of people. This is actually what we say really built the culture of Europe and the cultures of Europe. So in that sense, until today, the role of Benedictines is very important for education and formation of people.
And Father, before I let you go, I'm wondering, would you mind maybe sharing maybe some facts about St. Benedict that people don't know, or maybe talk about how he's still relevant today?
Yes, I'll gladly do that. St. Benedict fosters peace in his monastery. You know, his first monastery in Subiaco and then on Monte Cassino, there were many people from different cultures and ways of life. Free people and people who were slaves before, Goths and Romans, old people, young people. And he managed to let them all live together in peace. And that was something extraordinary. He did it by creating the rule of St. Benedict, the Holy Rule, and also to giving an order to this community. And so until today, peace, or in Latin pax, is a very important feature of Benedictine life. And this is what St. Benedict, also as a patron of Europe, can still attribute or still give to the peoples here in Europe, but also beyond. So how do we live together in peace? How do we respect each other? By putting God into the center of our lives. That's basically, that was his approach.
And that is so very, very important. Father Wilde, thank you so much for your time today and speaking with us about all of this. We really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Up next, a nourishing meal in St. Peter's Square that isn't spiritual. We'll explain. We continue our coverage of a story EWTN News Nightly has been following. 2 Christians in Finland are on trial for their beliefs. A former member of parliament and a Lutheran bishop were charged with hate crimes for publicly stating their thoughts on sexuality and marriage, including through tweeting a Bible verse. A verdict is expected in March. Joining me now to discuss is Joy Pullman, executive editor of The Federalist. Joy, welcome. Great to see you. Let's talk a little bit more about this trial. I understand The Federalist recently interviewed both Paavi Räsänen as well as Bishop Juhana Pohjola, who are at the center of this trial. What did they have to say?
One of the most surprising things to me, and also just really encouraging, has been they all talked about how surprising but gratifying it is that basically because of the very odd government prosecution for being Christians, so we have both freedom of speech and religion aspects, and it's a very unusual case. It's really the farthest that these laws have ever been pushed to persecute really a religious, statement. So amid this really weird case, one of the top things that they said to me that I didn't expect was it's given them a massive platform to be able to quote the Bible and talk about Christian beliefs to the entire world. The charge that is being used against both Päivi, a member of parliament in Finland, and Bishop Juhana. So what happened was in 2004, he had asked her to write a booklet about basic, mainstream, very old classic Christian teachings about marriage and sexuality. And so she did that, and it was a really tiny booklet. I understand they told me, printed maybe a couple of hundred times, and it's almost 20 years old. But now that the case has really targeted both of them, they've been charged for writing and publishing that booklet. That booklet has been translated in languages. It's been to basically every continent on the globe, all the way to Asia, to Africa, all of Europe, and the United States. But what basically, has been intended for evil, for persecution, to repress Christianity and public, and free speech in the West, is also having kind of a rebounding effect where it's giving these Christians the opportunity to spread the Christian message to the entire world. They never would have had it without being singled out in this way.
Wow, that's incredible. And Joy, for those who may not be all that familiar with this case, what is it that was said that could possibly violate Finland's hate crime law?
So, in 2009, Päivi criticized her own church. So Finland has a state church, and that state church co-sponsored a homosexual pride parade in Finland in 2019. And so Päivi is an Orthodox Christian. In fact, her husband is a pastor. And she told me, she prayed about it and then decided to tweet a picture of Bible verses that, very clearly show that is against what the Bible teaches is Orthodox Christian belief. The Bible teaches that real marriage is between one man and one woman for their entire lives. So Päivi put these Bible verses on Twitter, and she was complained about to Finland's top prosecutor. And so that prosecutor initiated an investigation of Päivi that went back, like I mentioned, 20 years, found this booklet that connected her to Bishop Poila. He published it through a small religious foundation in Finland. And so he was also dragged into court. And the prosecutor, the police in Finland brought Päivi and the bishop into their headquarters, interrogated them for 13 hours total for Päivi. She was interrogated 3 times. Really directly, she and the bishop told me the interrogations were not about the law. They were not about secular matters, which is usually the case. They were literally being put on trial for their faith and asked very detailed theological questions. And the same thing happened when they were finally brought into trial for the same reason this spring. People who were in person at the trial that I interviewed, lawyers about who were helping with this case, told me that it was like a modern day Inquisition or heresy or blasphemy trial. It was really putting Christianity on trial, and that's never been done in Europe in exactly this way. So it's an unprecedented use of government power to prosecute people directly for their religious beliefs.
Joy, we have less than 30 seconds left, but really quickly, what's the big takeaway from this case, and how do you expect things to kind of play out?
So I guess the takeaway is, no matter what happens, God protects his own and uses all things for his own good. But that doesn't mean that it is a good thing that we're at risk of losing these crucial freedoms that we have across the entire West.
Well, Joy, we're going to leave right there. Thank you so much for your time today and speaking with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Pope Francis is advancing the sainthood cause of a cardinal from Argentina who organized the first World Youth Days. A decree today states that Cardinal Eduardo Pierino lived a life of heroic virtue. Now venerable, Cardinal Pierino served in many leadership positions, including in the Curia before he passed in 1998. Pope Francis has said that Pierino was his friend when they both lived in Argentina. The future pope even heard his confession at one point. Well, finally tonight, a nonprofit group has set up a shop at the Vatican, and it's distributing more than 400 meals every week to the homeless. Project ARC began its work earlier this week. It is serving warm food to the homeless near St. Peter's Basilica. It has also served meals to the underprivileged in 3 other Italian cities. Organizers note many soup kitchens had to close during the pandemic, and there were people who had not eaten for days. The truck will serve meals for 4 nights a week. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.